All right. And we actually finished what I wanted to today. That's unusual. All right. All right, so this is what we call the Afterburn. If you have any comments or questions, you're welcome to go ahead and raise your hand. And Nate will be coming around with the mic. If you're on live stream, Rob and Kurt have the live stream under control over there. And next week, we will be going probably into 2 Corinthians. And we'll be there for a while since we're going to cover like 4 chapters or so. It's a big one, okay? So, but the whole reason we're covering so much, though, is for context. And hopefully you understand there's things that I'm hoping the light bulb went on today and over the last couple of weeks when we've been in Corinthians going, I've heard these verses before, I've read these verses before, but always in a different context because nobody actually gave you the time to go back and put it in the right framework. So hopefully this is making some clarity for you. All right, we'll begin with Craig.
Yes, in Luke 17:10, I always have had a problem with thinking myself worthy. Seems Yeshua was telling us that that after we have done all that we were commanded, that we are to say ourselves unworthy servants.
Right. Okay. So what he's talking about here is that we have to be careful of the attitude of just doing the bare minimum, literally checking off the check boxes, as opposed to taking it more fully. Because the commandment, in a literal sense, is not, when we talk about spirit and truth, is not the fullness of the intent. He's saying, look, if you just do the truth part, the physically doing or not doing, that was your duty, he said. He said, we have done what it was our duty to do. He says, but what you need to do is you have to go above and beyond that. Above and beyond is not doing more things, but doing it more fully, if that makes sense. Remember Messiah's first sermon, so to speak, he said, there are those of you out there that think you're okay because you didn't commit adultery. Oh, but you wanted to. You were thinking about it in your mind. So you can say that literally they were an unworthy servant in that they didn't commit it. They were obedient. They didn't actually commit the adultery. But that's not good enough. Okay? You have to take it to the fullness of the intent, which is to get under control your desires and your lusts that eventually, if unchecked, might lead to the action. But up to that point, thankfully, the action hadn't happened. But he said, but that's not enough. Okay? That's not the point. The point is you have to do it more fully. So you have people that would show up to have a Last Supper meal in 1 Corinthians, and what do you see going on is the idea that, okay, they showed up, but now they're turning it into something it shouldn't be. It's not respectful. People are getting drunk. People are not allowing for food for everybody else. People are being gluttonous, whatever it is. They're not caring about their brothers. And so, sure, they showed up. Same thing with you. You could show up at a feast. You can show up at a Sabbath, but are you showing up in a worthy manner? Are you getting the most out of it or sharing and being available for the most? Because some of you only come here thinking about what you're going to get. What about hoping that everybody else will get? And that maybe you could be useful to somebody and you can either listen or share something that might help somebody or bless somebody, okay? Just being available to do it more fully, to be here with the right attitude is a beginning, okay? Where's the mic? All right, Jonathan?
Rabbi, do we get to use Numbers chapter 30, verse 10 and 11 as an example for the way Ahab was towards Jezebel?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about where, the only reason she could do what she could do was because Ahab let her. Okay? And so he was bringing judgment on himself. I mean, he basically did nothing to stop her. Okay? And so I know everybody wants to give the whole Jezebel thing a big deal, and it is. But it doesn't happen unless there's an Ahab letting it happen. Okay? It took both of them to create that problem. She, of course, is through history given more of the grief, but I'm a big fan of giving him a bunch of grief. If he was the man that was necessary in that house and stood up, she doesn't get to do what she did. Doesn't happen. It took an Ahab to make that happen. All right, who's next? Okay, Michelle?
My question is, you were talking about coming under the authority, and you have to come under a male authority, leadership, not the Messiah. That's my first part question. And my second part question is if your husband is no longer a viable authority to come under because of your divorce, say he left you because he doesn't believe in Messiah, you can't call the Messiah to come just you be under the authority of the Messiah. You have to be under authority of another man. And if you pick the rabbi to go under authority, because that would be the logical solution for a woman, so she wouldn't have to pick someone who she wouldn't consider a leader under the authority of Messiah, would that mean that when she tithes, would she be considered a widow, and how would that affect the assembly? Because sometimes it was known that the rabbis and the Pharisees would oppress the widow and devour the houses of the widow. And in the time of the assembly, when they gave all that they had, they actually shared it with everyone in the assembly, and it didn't go directly to the authority. So my question would be, is the widow, which would be my cause, under the authority of Messiah or under authority of the leadership of the assembly? And how much is she actually supposed to contribute without being devoured?
Okay, there was like 6 questions in there. I'll try to address them, and a bunch of things that actually were not correct, and I can help correct them. They were a little confused, okay? Okay, the first thing is that there's nothing that I said, hopefully, that would even have hinted that you're not under Messiah by coming under the structure. The wives coming under their husband are still coming under Messiah, but they have to come under their husband. Okay, so there's still a headship of a man in that vertical structure. Okay, that's number one. Number two, when you talk about the first century assembly where everyone had everything in common and they gave it all in, first of all, we're not in that structure now. We're not in the first century assembly structure. Second of all, they didn't do what you're saying. They gave it all to James, and then James distributed it. So they did give it to one person who then distributed it. They didn't just share it among themselves. Okay, that is in the book of Acts, and they did give it to the leadership, and the leadership distributed it. But that's not just about tithing. That was about them living in an all-in community where they shared amongst themselves all things. And so they tithe. In addition to that, remember, tithes went to the temple, not to the assembly at that time because it was a temple. Okay? The tithing still went to the temple. They shared everything else in common by selling their things and whatever excess they had so that everybody would have. And that was still under the leadership to then take and distribute as was needed. Now, there were those that were devouring. I don't know exactly what they were doing, but certainly we see this even in ministries today where they take advantage of the widows and the elderly and to have them give all their funds and to make we see this in Ezekiel 22. It talks about, devouring and taking advantage of the poor. So we're not talking about that. The only monies or funds that should be coming to any kind of assembly or group or leadership should be the tithes and the normal offerings, and there should be no other bilking of money or pressure to give funds or money. So that would be under the normal Torah instruction of tithes and offerings, okay? Which has nothing to do with whether you're a widow or not, okay? Whether you're a widow or not, if you have the financial ability, because you're still working and providing a lucrative income, then that would be tithed on. Of course, if you're an elderly widow and you're just receiving, Social Security or some other benevolent program, you don't tithe on benevolence. Okay, you can certainly make an offering if you feel so moved, but you don't tithe on benevolence. Okay, and Social Security is an insurance program. It's essentially benevolence. So you don't have to tithe on that. I talked about that in the tithing teaching. And so there are some issues that are being confused in all of that. Now, as far as going just to and coming just under Messiah, here's the problem. If you're going to just go under Messiah, are you actually ready to trust what your head tells you he's saying? Okay? Are you prepared? And do you really think you can trust what your brain's going to tell you he's saying? Because you don't have just his voice going into your head. You've got your voice going in your head. And you got the enemy's voice going in your head. And all three of them want to convince you it's Messiah. That's why you need a headship. That's why wives needed a husband or a father. That's why men need leadership from the assembly, because you can't trust you. And so you may think Messiah is coming to you directly. Every confused person out there that I run into in some sort of position of self-appointed leadership thinks Messiah is teaching them directly. Now, either Messiah is not teaching any of them, or if he's teaching all of them, then we have a very confused Messiah. Because if they're all being led by Messiah, how do they have 5 different or 10 different calendars, 16 different ways to say his name, and all the other mess that we have? Because they're not all listening to Messiah, but they're being confused by the other voices pretending to be Messiah. And so it takes you coming under anointed, appointed leadership for clarity. And that's the responsibility of the leader. So the answer is no, not that you wouldn't wish it could be that way. When Messiah is literally here, we won't have any of that confusion. The word will go forth from Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem, and the Torah will go forth, and Yeshua will be sitting on the throne, and we will know exactly what he wants us to do. Okay? But your question's a good question, because we have so many people out there to say, oh, well, we're just led by the Ruach. Same idea, because they see the Ruach as being that connecting point of Messiah. And either the Ruach is confused and a mess, or maybe not everybody's being led by the Ruach. I don't think the Ruach is confused. I don't think there's any confusion whatsoever. We're told that we're not given the spirit of confusion, but of a sound mind. Okay, so no confusion in the Ruach. But yet, all those out there claiming they're just led of the Ruach, they don't all see things the same, do they? It's a confused mess. That's why there's a need for vertical structure. That's why James was clearly making the decisions that needed to be made in the book of Acts. This is where you're quoting from, where they had things in common. People still went to the leadership in the book of Acts in Jerusalem to make decisions. They didn't just sit back and pray for Messiah to tell them things. Now, they might have, but they would have gotten confused answers. Not because Messiah is confused, but because there are other voices in your head leading the charge to get you to kind of think they're the Messiah. We know Hasatan wants you to think he's Messiah. By the way, you'd like to be too. You'd like to be in charge of you and skew things and bend things. And so that little self-sovereign voice is the one that a lot of times confuses the issue. Messiah is usually the one waiting for the other two to be quiet. Once you can get the other two voices to shut up, maybe he can talk a little bit. But that's when you go for confirmation of what you think Messiah might be saying to leadership and saying, I was feeling like Messiah was leading me in this way. I wanted to call and get confirmation and see your opinion on that. That's if you have found somebody you believe is anointed and appointed to have that responsibility. Okay? And that's the issue. By the way, leadership is just as susceptible to confusing what Messiah is saying when it comes to their own personal stuff, as opposed to when you ask leadership about your stuff. Because when it's personal stuff, I have preferences. I've got my own issues. So when I see my own life, so I have to have my accountability people that I can talk to and run things by. Because we're all susceptible to that. Does that make sense? Okay, so hopefully that answered your question. Okay, next question. Okay, Daweed?
Yeah, sorry, David. I just wanted to say that, number one, I am very thankful for your leadership. I know I've been kind of a butt this last week, but at the same time...
That's a technical counseling term.
Yes, it is a technical counseling term.
Yeah.
And I did want to apologize for those times that I've been a butt publicly, and we'll talk about those times privately in a little bit. But the thing is that... But the thing is that...
I think somebody bet him how many times he could say the word butt and get away with it.
However...
On live stream. All right.
I noticed a clear difference in my relationships, specifically with my wife, and in my life, my own personal life, between the time I was sort of, kind of half listening to what you were telling me, and when I started actually listening to what you were telling me and putting the things and tools in place that you told me to put in place, like the 7x7 card and the affirmation sheet and everything else, and working all through some of that stuff, there was a huge drastic difference between me actually listening and submitting and doing what you said and me thinking I knew better and or not, just simply being lazy and not doing it. And I just wanted to thank you for the fact that you're here and Abba put you here. I believe that 100%, and I do believe you are anointed, appointed, and I thank you for that. And I just wanted to make sure that you got holy props.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, look, I want to make this really clear. I'll look at the camera this way, okay? I want to make this really clear. 0 of this is about me. If you can find yourself someone that's anointed, appointed, that, you know, that's your job is to find that person. It's not my job to claim to be, okay? And that we've said this over and over again from Ephesians when Paul talks about it, you know, when he lays out the fivefold ministry. You have a need for this structure to be there. Because he says that those guys are there for the perfecting of the saints until, and we're not to the until yet, until we all have come into the fullness of completeness of Messiah. I mean, I paraphrased that, but you understand? And so that also, by the way, answers Michelle's question. I mean, you need that structure and that leadership, at least the way Paul sees it, until. And we haven't gotten to the until yet. And Paul's writing this after the death, burial, resurrection, and everything, when everybody has access to Messiah through the Ruach to a certain degree, but that's not the same thing as saying that you don't need the structure. And by the way, you need the structure also to do what? To practice being inside of a structure. Because we're going to be living in what's called a kingdom. It's a structure with very clear authority. It's not going to be everybody just does whatever they want. It's a kingdom with a king. And praise Yah, we're having the King of Kings coming. And so he does now, I think he could, if that was his choice, he could certainly have each of us directly receive from Messiah, but then we'd never learn to act in this manner with authority and structure. We'd never have an opportunity to practice that. And so this is the way he's chosen to force us to need the structure. And I don't think there's a person in this room that hasn't found at some point that when they did come under authority, that there were things that they had thought Messiah had told them that turned out to not be Messiah at all. Everybody agree with that? Things that you had thought Messiah had told you, only to find out, oops, it was really me or some other source that I was giving into because it was my preference. It didn't really turn out to be Messiah at all. All right? We've all done that. Okay? I did something for a couple of guys one time, and I brought them from Florida up to Tennessee and was taking care of them. And I said, after all I've done for you, blah, blah, blah. They said, oh, you can't say that. You're stealing it was Yahweh did it. I said, not yet. Right now it's looking like me because it isn't working. I thought it was Yahweh doing it, and maybe Yahweh had a purpose because everything he uses, either he causes or allows. But a lot of it looked like it's because I wanted to bring them up, and I did. But it wasn't bearing the fruit I was thinking it was going to bear. Now, maybe it was part of some bigger purpose of his, but when they started saying, oh, no, you didn't do it, well, the fruit right now looks like it was me. I'm not saying that was a good thing either, that it came out of my flesh wanting to do something for them that maybe I got ahead of Yahweh on. Because the fruit will tell you who it was about. Okay, and I was doing what I thought was a good thing, but I had to say, look, the jury's out. At this point, it's not looking like Yahweh was all doing this. It looked like I was doing it. Okay, so we're all can fall into that. So when I do things, I don't ever claim, Yahweh told me to do this and this is all him. We'll wait and see how it plays out. I'm susceptible like anybody else to have my own voice get in there, my own heart, my own preferences. Does that make sense? Okay, I just use that one as an example because that was the one where they threw it in my face. Oh, no, don't you steal. Yahweh did this. Not clear yet. Jury's still out. He allowed it. Not sure he caused it. Okay? He always allows or causes. So at the very minimum, he's allowing it. But did he cause it? Not sure. Okay? So we have to be careful with that. Always be aware that it's not in man, even with Messiah and the Ruach and everything else, it's not in man to figure out how to place his own feet. We need guidance. We need accountability. We need protection and covering. That's the whole point, was that the headship provides a covering. Okay? I mean, the idea of covering means that you are more protected. Okay, if you're wearing clothing that's heavier and it's winter, you are protected with the covering from the elements of the outside. If it's raining, you can wear certain things that protect you and it covers you. You have a wound, we put something on it to cover it, to keep it safe and protect it. So we understand the idea of coverings provide a certain amount of protection and safety. We all need to have covering. Yes, Messiah ultimately is our covering, and really actually the Father's ultimately our covering, because he said, I'm only following him. Messiah said, I'm only following the Father. So follow me as I follow the Father. Paul says, follow me as I follow Messiah. I'd say the same thing. Follow me as I follow them. That's the vertical chain. Okay? Next question. Over here. Okay. Christina? Put the mic right up by your mouth.
Yes, sir. Okay, so a lot of people don't know my background. My mother was raised Mennonite, so I have a lot of Amish and Mennonite family. But I also was raised very conservative Pentecostal as well. And that's a little bit of the background that I'm saying because I want you to know, Rabbi, this teaching was healing for me because these scriptures have been used to verbally bash me over the head for decades. And I've seen it done wrong. I'm not saying that the Mennonite church and the Amish and even the Pentecostal people have done it wrong, but the people that have been in my life who've been in authority over me have either neglected it or they have used it to be the dictator in the family. And I just wanted you to know how much I appreciate you taking the time to explain this because it's open. It wasn't a light bulb moment for me. It was a healing moment where I was like, okay, I finally understand it.
Amen.
Because I finally, a few weeks ago, I was like, Father, you know that this is like really difficult for me to like stomach. But I know that you have submission there for a reason and authority. And I need to learn this and I need to understand it finally. And understand it from your perspective, not from what I've experienced before. And so this teaching was for me.
Amen. I appreciate that. You know, that's the goal of when I teach is that somebody out there is going to, you know, or a lot of you are going to have that either epiphany or clarity or healing or something. But understand that the best way to destroy something Yahweh wants to do is to have it over and over and over again be done so badly that people won't recognize that it really is correct. So when you have male headship done so badly to the point where the news is talking about toxic masculinity, that's actually a term now, okay? Because men have done the man thing so badly that there's no real evidence or thought that there's actually a role and purpose to be done correctly. And that's where all the usurping comes, and that's where all the mocking comes. Just turn on any sitcom TV show, and the man is made to look like a bumbling idiot, incompetent, and the woman has to do everything. Okay? And that's just promoting and enabling and encouraging that wrong model. And then sometimes when you see the other end of it, you see the man being an abusive, dominating dictator. You don't generally see good, loving leadership protecting and providing for the family. And so it's not easy for someone like Christina to have been gone through what she went through to understand just because it's been done badly, that doesn't mean it's wrong. And that's really why there's a lot of teachings out there against structure, against leadership, that don't agree with what I'm teaching, because only experiences that most of these people have ever had was it done badly, so it's been awful. Suffering, pain, destroying of families, destroying of people's own self-worth and everything else has been done by this wrong model. I should say the wrong model, the wrong implementation of the right model. When you do it badly, it destroys people, but it also destroys what Yahweh was trying to show you so that you would think that what he was trying to do was actually not right. Or just think that people are understanding it wrong. And so there's teachings out there by fairly prominent Messianic groups that are totally against the vertical model because they have never experienced it being done right. So now they bend and twist verses to justify the circle of elders kumbaya model. Okay? And that doesn't work. You know, nobody's in charge. Everybody sits around in a circle and they're all like, everybody's happy and everybody has an opinion and nothing ever gets done. I've been in groups. How many of you have been in groups like that? Does anything ever get done? No, because they're in a circle and nobody's there to make a decision. Look, leadership does one of two things. It either gently pulls you in the direction you're supposed to go or gently shoves you in the direction you're supposed to go. But when there's no leadership, everybody just sits. in their circle going nowhere. Okay? I've said this before. There was a congregation that I went to visit as a guest speaker in, where I can't remember what, somewhere in like Wyoming, Nebraska, someplace like that. And they're great, really great people. I mean, you could say this about any group, but these are really nice people, very loving, very warm, very friendly. I could see why they love being together, but they only had a circle of elders. And when I took the Q&A time with them, they were asking some really, I thought, very basic questions that they should have known the answers to had there been any leadership. But there wasn't, so they didn't have them, even though they'd been around for quite a little while. The group had been in a congregation for over 10 years. And I was like, at one point I said exactly what he said. I said, look, I want to tell you guys, you're like awesome, some of the warmest, nicest people I've ever met. But the thing that strikes me is that you are suffering for a lack of leadership because you should know the answers to these things. You don't, because there's nobody here to make those decisions. I said, I'm happy to help you with that. I can help develop leadership here, identify leadership here, be leadership surrogate until you have it or whatever. But the reason you're where you are is for 10 years, all you've done is go around in the same circle. Okay? The vision is given to the leader, not to the assembly. And then the vision needs to be protected and implemented by the leader to get the assembly from where they are to where they're supposed to go. That's the way the scripture's laid out. Okay? Moses was given the vision. He shared it then through the elders and the 70, etc., with the rest of the body. James was given the vision. Paul was given the vision. Okay, we can say with Peter in Acts 10, he was given a vision. Okay, and then he shared that with others. We don't have it go out all, and then it's shared. And then the Ruach confirms it for you. And that's why people are moving here. You had it confirmed in you that this is where you needed to be to form this community. And independently, dozens of families have done that. That's not for me to tell you this is the one place in the world, blah, blah, blah. But for whatever reason, for a lot of you, this is where Yahweh has wanted you to be. Okay? Now, and I've not promoted that from the point of view as everybody needs to move here. You guys have just been doing it on your own. And then I find out, oh, by the way, we got another one coming in July. Another family's coming in August. No, okay, they're all coming. We need a bigger building. But you're coming because you see something happening in two ways. You see something happening with the teacher, but you also see something happening in the community. You see a place for your family to fit into. You see a place with people that are buying into the same vision. A vision of how they can be a community walking in Torah, seeking to change and transform into the Messiah's image. And so people are coming here to facilitate that. It was hard to do where you lived before, by yourself. And so I give a lot of, I don't even know what the word I would look, I really give a lot of credit or whatever it is to those of you that would uproot your lives to come down here. It started really with Shira. Coming down from New Hampshire, just uprooted her life, came down here to be a part of the group, and many have followed since. But the thing is, it's about you and Messiah and the Ruach and what you're being led to do in that context. But understand, as we're going through this, that the same issue is going through all of the same thing, which is, are you going to understand that just because it's been done badly doesn't mean that it's wrong, the structure thing. Read your book and see what the structure is in your book. Because the people would say, well, Paul set up elders in all the assemblies, and yet somehow the assemblies always contacted him for decisions. So those elders weren't necessarily all making decisions. That's why you have the letters you read to Corinth and Ephesus and Galatia, etc., all the way those different areas, because they needed their leader to make choices. And he said, what did he say at the end of this reading today? And the rest of it, when I show up, I will set in order. Oh, I think, at least Paul thought he was in charge. Because setting in order is a in charge phrase. And as to the rest, I will set it in order when I see you. That should have made everybody nervous, because it sounded very much like, because he already said, should I praise what you're doing? I will not. So I'm not praising what you're doing. And when I get there, we'll straighten all this mess out. That sounded pretty strong. It didn't sound like everybody's going to have a Ruach party and sit and go, or whatever, and wait for the Ruach to give a message or something. Paul was going to walk right in and say, okay, we're having a meeting. Everybody sit down. All this stuff ends now. We're not doing this anymore. That's what it sounds like to me. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it. Because I know as a leader, that's what I would mean when I said it. When I get there, we'll fix it. And by the way, I've had those conversations when I've been out of the country or visiting somewhere else and things are happening here, and I've had to say to the leadership, okay, do this, this, and this in the meantime. I'll set it in order when I get there. We'll fix this. We'll take this confusion and clarify it and stop the nonsense. Because nonsense always happens, and especially when I'm not here. My wife calls me like every time. She goes, I don't know, sweetheart. She said, but every time you're out of town. But that's the way, that's it, the human nature. Without the structure. Guess what happened whenever Paul left? They had to chase him down with somebody with a letter. By the way, we got a bunch of problems over here. All right? So keep that in mind. Okay, Sarah Beth.
Yes, I wanted two thank yous. One, thank you for this teaching, but more for all the ones that went before it. That scripture that we read today was one of the ones that just like completely confused me. I'm like, what are we talking about here? And it's like, even as you were explaining it, even as I was reading it, I read it in a totally different way, and it made so much more sense. Thank you so much. And on the other side, since we're talking about covering, thank you so much for being my covering. It has brought so much peace. I mean, I don't know how many of you know my story, but I didn't have a father growing up. I basically felt like I was without a covering until I came here. And it was the scariest thing ever. And to come under your leadership and to come under your protection and have that loving leader has made a world of difference. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Amen. Okay, the mic's coming around over on this side. Okay, live stream.
Yeah, we wanted to get this in before Anna Tripp. She just sent a message that talking about the prayer request. She knows it's over, but Daryl, her son, just passed out. And he's having a celiac Crohn's attack. Please pray for a quick healing from this attack.
Amen.
You want me to just continue on? Okay.
Okay, let's just go ahead and say, because Father, we want to come before you and just ask you to be with this young man and the attack that he's having, and that you would guide and inspire all those that are near him to know what to do in this situation, that you would have your hand and your authority over this, and that, Father, that whatever would be done would be to your glory and your honor, and that you would give shalom and peace to those in this very challenging time. In Yeshua's name, amen. All right, was there anybody else with a hand up over here before we go to the live stream? Yeah, go do 5 of them. Go ahead, do as many as you want.
Okay.
Because Janet, I knew, would have her hand up at some point anyway. I'm surprised it took this long. Go ahead.
Okay, from Aaron Murray.
See, she still thinks she's on live stream, so she's waiting for the live stream so she could ask her question. Go ahead.
All right, from Aaron Murray, Numbers 39, chapter 30, verse 9 speaks of widows and divorced women and how their vows are on their own heads. Context states if they remarry, their vows are once again filtered through their husbands. But where in Scripture does it state a widow or a divorced woman is to have a covering through the community?
Okay, there are no verses that say that. It's just by logical inference that they need it, and the only way that they could have it would be that way. And so that would fall under a Deuteronomy 17 decision by me. But it just seems to be inferred that if they need it, then the only way to get it would be through the covering of the authority in the community. And so by inference and by logic, I have offered that. So it doesn't say that the widows have to do that. I'm simply saying that that's what's available. And certainly, this is where we have the Deuteronomy 17 authority given to leadership to try to make decisions on things that, for whatever reason, are not explicitly said. What they are telling you is that if you are on your own, then without covering, same thing with men. Men, you can have covering. Come to the leadership with your issues, and then you have covering. Otherwise, you're on your own. That's the scriptural authorities to say that as long as you're under authority, that the ultimate decision problem goes on the one with the most authority who is involved. If there's a husband and wife, the authority is more on the husband, so the husband gets more of the blame and takes on the responsibility for the decision once made aware of it. If you're a widow, you don't. Let's go from this way, logic, because remember, he gave us brains to be logical. Okay. Does a widow need the covering any less than a young woman in her father's house or a wife? Does she need it less? No. So the only other place to get it would be the leadership in the community, but would have to be by agreement. So no, there aren't any verses that explain that. That was just my interpretation, and we made that available. Okay? So I don't have a verse to say that you are required, and I don't think I said that during the teaching that widows were required. I simply said that the only option available to you to protect you, and by the way, I think another logic out of Scripture is that we are told over and over again to do everything we can for the widows, to meet all of their needs. If that's the case, then one of the needs they have is covering, to keep them safe, to protect them, and to help them with vows. Does it make sense? Okay, so this is a need. So I have seen through the holistic approach of Scripture, piecing it all together, that the only logical way that we can do this would be through the leadership. But I have also said that because it's not a dictate of Scripture, it needs to be by agreement, just like the relationship of a husband and a wife. The father-daughter thing is by nature. You were born into that relationship. All the other ones are by choice. Husbands are by choice. And so then coming under leadership would be by choice. But then they would have to come and ask the leadership, I would like you to be my covering, and the leadership would have to say, I accept that responsibility. Okay? So Aaron makes a good point. There is nothing beyond the verses here that say that a widow, but by the way, this is simply saying if you aren't covered, same thing with a single man. Single man, by the way, you have no covering, you're a single man. Whatever you do is on you. A woman without a covering is the same as a single man. Whatever you do is on you. That's why you need to get a covering, okay?
Okay, from Charlie and Deanne Johnson, says, can a son be a covering for a mother who is a widow without a father or a rabbi?
Not the way this vertically structures. Okay, and remember, the son's going to also have emotional biases from being in that place, because it's not the son's natural or in any way, shape, or form his responsibility for the mother's responsibility for the son. Now, when you get to a certain age, the children do take care of the parents, and so I would suppose that I would counsel about it, but I mean, if let's say the mother's now in her 70s or 80s and her 50 or 60-year-old son is taking care of her, then maybe that would work as a covering at that point. It just depends on how the life has where we are in the timeline. Or if the mother is now disabled or has some other issues, even at a younger age, where she needs to be cared for. But I would say, no, the son should not be in that position unless he's already in that position. How's that? Okay? If the son is already caring for the mother, then I think, yes, it could work. If the son is not caring for the mother and has no responsibilities in that area, then no. Does that make sense? Okay? But children, I'm talking to all the adult children, you need to, if you can, and if at all possible, make sure that you are caring for your parents. And that doesn't mean directly yourself. You just need to be sure they're being cared for. Now, you may have another sibling that's caring for them or some other situation, but you need to be aware and make sure that just like they took care of you when you were little, you need to take care of them when they're old. You know? And I know David Hayes loves to say to all the parents, treat your children nice because they're the ones who pick out your nursing home. Okay? But as children, that doesn't mean you have to go do anything in specific. Just make sure that they're being cared for. Because they may prefer to care for themselves a certain way or have a certain sibling or whatever it is, but just be aware that they're cared for. All right? But if you have, as a son, back to the question, already the responsibilities of caring for, then that would include these things as well. I can see how that could work. Okay? And see, that's how decisions get made sometimes. I got to talk it through out loud and kind of work it through and understand the parameters. But generally speaking, the answer would be no. Okay, next question.
Okay, from Beyond Ready. What's the proper response if a non-Torah observant husband asks the wife to clean up the kitchen that he cooked in on Shabbat? This is from LaDonna.
Okay, so you've got the non-covenant husband wants you to clean up. No problem with you taking the dishes and putting them over by the sink or sticking them in the dishwasher or whatever. And I mean, that's something that's only going to take you a couple of minutes, and that's not a problem. Okay? As a matter of fact, I think for hygienic reasons, you shouldn't just leave your stuff right out there in the food and stuff. Just take it over and put it in the sink or put it in the dishwasher. I don't run the dishwasher. I just put it in there. Okay, but we'll go ahead and just put things in the sink and that kind of stuff, and then just very politely say, I will take care of it after sundown. All right? So you're giving them partially what they want without breaking any Torah, without breaking the Sabbath, because I don't see there's any breaking of Sabbath, to take your dishes that you had your food on and putting them in the place that they need to be in the sink or whatever. Okay? But that you then won't clean them until you get to the next day or to sundown. All right? But be polite about it. Okay? So you're respectful. You're taking the stuff and putting it in the sink. Now, here's another thing that might come up. Maybe, this is something that you might want to think about. This just came into my head. What if your uncovenanted husband is home all day and you're going to services? Okay? And he's not going to want you to just take in the food or whatever the plates and just pile it up in the sink where he's going to have to now deal with it. So maybe have a little tub that you put everything in that doesn't have to go in the sink. And that way he can use the sink all day and do whatever he wants. And whatever it is that he had wanted you to clean, so put it in something so it's out of the way, or the dishwasher, just so it's not in his way. Be respectful. Don't let, if possible, don't let the Sabbath become a stumbling block for him. But don't break it. Don't break it, but don't be stumbling block. Be very polite and say absolutely no problem. Take his dishes and put them so they're dealt with. They're not in his way, and you'll take care of it later. All right? If he doesn't like that, you have a different issue in your marriage. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now you've got a dictating, controlling thing going on that's beyond the normal relationship. If he wanted you to take the stuff to handle it, and you've handled it, and you have more dishes he could use all day, there's no reason except control to force the issue beyond that. And so now we have something else to maybe talk about for your marriage. Is that making sense for everybody? Okay? All right. Next question.
All right, from Cheryl W. Regarding commitments, can you help me understand what types of decisions do I need to give to my husband / covering? And also she's asking, does a single woman reach an age where she is no longer under her father's covering?
All right. So the second question first, look, if you're still living in your father's house, okay, then you're still under your father's covering, even if you're getting to whatever age that might be. But a lot of it also has to do with, are you in your relationship with your father, are you under his authority in his house, or are you acting real independent and not under his authority in your house? Okay, because there are people that will then get to an age where they're renting and they're still living in their parents' house and they're living very independent, and even though they're under the same house, under the same roof. And that's different choices that different people make of how they're going to run their house. The point is this: if you allow the leadership in your life to be aware of big decisions that could turn around to bite you in the, whatever we kept saying, then that's the kind of stuff you might want to make sure somebody knows, otherwise you own it. Just recognize, whatever you share, the opportunity then becomes where you don't need to own it anymore. If you're comfortable owning everything, don't share it with anybody, but then understand you own it. That was the point of Numbers chapter 30. If you don't share it, you own it. Is that simple enough? So what should you share? Anything that you want to be careful that if you end up owning it might turn out to be a problem. So run it by somebody else so that either A, they can correct you if you're wrong, or B, they can own it if you're both not sure, but at least now it's on them. Let them own the decision. And only you can decide what you're willing to own. But this goes back to that whole thing I've been saying, right? Own it, fix it, whatever. Own it. You got to own it. If you don't share it with somebody in authority, you own it. And that's not wrong. Just accept it and own it. You don't have to share anything with anybody. He's just telling you, if you don't, you own it. There's nothing in here that says that you have to do these things in front of your father. Okay? Now, Paul says if you do these things uncovered, you really put yourself into risk for problems. But in Paul's case, he was talking about those that were going against or outside of authority in the idea of being uncovered, not just not sharing it. But he says, here's the risk. If you don't do it correctly, you risk all this bad stuff coming about. Okay? But he was talking about more about stepping out from under authority and not doing what authority is, the structure has told you to do. Okay? Next.
Okay, these it's for two separate people, but kind of the same thing. Rick Berry says, what is a vow? Just any word or statement made, question, or when a solemn promise or declaration is made before Yahweh. And then Charles Davis says, can you give an example of when a wife makes a vow that a husband would need to be aware of?
Okay, so in Moses' time, and probably still even in Paul's time, there was an actual structure to this with something like, as Yahweh lives, blah, 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 blah. I will do this or I will do that, sort of to affirm that you can believe me when I say I'm going to do something. And a lot of times it can happen when you're praying. You could say between you and your Creator, I'm committing to do this or stop doing that or whatever. As you live, I'm never going to make this mistake. Whatever. And you just got to be careful the things that you say. But we could also talk about contracts that you can get into. Look, you can get into a contract to buy furniture or a house or a car or some other thing, or some other business transaction that really you can get stuck with if you didn't have somebody there to say, hold on, time out, don't do that. Okay? But when you ask the question, what would be today, what would that look like? Look, when you are speaking the word of Yahweh or praying, the things that you ask for praying or the things that you claim are the word of Yahweh speaking, if you don't have a covering there, if you're wrong, it's on you. That's what Paul's talking about there. Okay? Commitments to things as far as like making an oath, a vow. I commit to doing or not doing. That's what's going on in Numbers 30, okay? And they're linked together because there's a reason for the linkage to the idea of head covering. Now, as far as today, like what things should be brought to the husband, I think I answered that in the previous question, okay? Ladies, I would err on the side of caution. Share everything with him that you can share. If you can't share, you got a different relationship problem. But some of you don't share because you know he's going to say no. That's not a good relationship, Not a good relationship. Some of you hide stuff in the car waiting for him not to be home so you can bring it in the house. That's not a good relationship. If you know he would say no to it, then why are you doing it? Okay, next one. Okay, over here, Janet. Okay, please type in clearly into the live chat and we'll read your question.
Is that good? Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for the wonderful teaching. Excuse my voice, I kind of lost it in the praising. So, Deuteronomy 21:13, when you were tied to Corinthians, and you said, mourn self-sovereignty. Are you willing to do that? How do we women do that when we know that we're not honoring our husband's authority?
We'll say that again. Okay, so Deuteronomy 21:13, and then you're comparing that. Okay, so how do you know if you're being in your husband's authority or not?
And how do you mourn self-sovereignty?
Oh, how do you mourn the self-sovereignty? Okay, yeah, your voice is a little soft, so it's hard for me to hear. Okay, so how do you mourn the self-sovereignty? Okay. Anybody have a verse come to mind? Where is that? James 4. That's the one. Very good. The mic is feeding back. Okay, so I think the answer is in James 4, verse 8. Some of you said lament and mourn and weep, so that was where I was going. Good job. Okay, so in James 4, in verse 8, it says, draw near to Elohim, and he shall draw near to you. That's step one. Okay, draw near to him as you're going through this process. Cleanse your hands and cleanse your hearts, double-minded. So now you got to work on, before you can really get the morning going, you got to work on the fact and recognize that you're double-minded. You want, he wants, and they're not in sync. Okay, so if you're having a trouble, the question was, when you're having a struggle submitting to your husband. And so how do you lament and mourn and get that self-sovereign thing out of the way? So start off with drawing near to Elohim, cleansing, meaning recognizing, owning your part, knowing where you need to fix some of those things. Then he says, lament and mourn and weep. In other words, you like doing what you do. You like having your authority. And so letting it go is going to be painful. It's going to cause a level of suffering. He says, okay, then weep about it and mourn about it and be frustrated but get it out of your system. He says, lament and mourn and weep, and let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to dejection. Because you liked being in charge. You like having control. You like the security that it gives you to be the one making decisions. He says, but you're going to have to let that go. And letting it go is going to make you be like, ah, well, good. You could feel that, he says. Just don't stay there. Right? Feel it, lament, mourn, and weep. Get that out of your system, because then, in doing so, you'll be humbling yourself in the sight of the Master, and then he can lift you up. So you can get on your knees and say, this is hard. I hate it. Get that. It's okay, he's saying. But then in doing so, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try. I'm going to humble myself. I'm going to get down on my knees, and I'm going to say, Father, help me do this, so that then he can lift you up and give you the strength to do it. Okay? But recognize that. Okay, that's it. But go through that process. It's in James 4, verses 8 through 10. Okay? See, this is why you need to study your scriptures and allow the Ruach then to bring to memory the verses that are there that deal with almost everything you can think of. Because she said, well, how do I mourn? Okay, there's a verse that I knew. Okay, go to James 4. Some of you heard me teach enough so you knew to go to, you didn't know where it was, but you knew there was the verse. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Rabbi. 1 Corinthians 10:27, when it says, do we need to examine ourselves, does it, I have a hard time understanding if this is referring before we partake the bread and wine, or because we're supposed to examine ourselves all the time. So is there a particularly emphasis on sharing?
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know it's hard for your voice, but I think I know where you're going. Look, this is a very popular thing with all of the motivational speakers and the self-development speakers, but it's a very important point to have a clarity of your intention. That's what it's asking here. When it says to examine yourself, examine where is your head and your heart and what is your intention when you're coming together or when you're doing whatever you're doing. So it's not so much examining yourself looking for sin, because he's talking about when you come together, there's divisions and there shouldn't be, because you're not coming together with the right intent to come together in harmony and in peace and to come and partake of a particular meal or an event, even like coming here for Shabbat. Do you spend a few moments before you come to clearly in your mind set your intention? I do that in the opening prayer. I say how much we appreciate that you gave us this day and that we're looking for you to guide and lead us through. I'm trying to set our intention. So when he says examine yourself, I think what he's trying to do is tell you, examine your intention. Where is your mindset? What are you trying to accomplish? Because he says, so that whoever should eat of this bread or drink of this cup unworthily shall be guilty. Then he says, but let a man examine himself so that he eats and drinks in a worthy manner, etc. But he's also talking about when you come together. So you're not examining your perfection of your being and your behavior in general, but are you coming together with the appropriate mindset and intention of what's happening and what's supposed to happen so that you behave appropriately? Does that make sense? Does that answer the question? Okay. It's a good question. So, because a lot of the motivational guys out there are all talking about that we should increase our awareness of our intention in everything that we do. And actually, that's a great instruction. Anything that you go to do, look, that's how I was able to do a million things that I would never have done with my wife because I created a day, that I would give her a day. We called it Honey Bunny Day. Very, very cute and embarrassing, okay? But on Honey Bunny Day, I could do things I would never want to do because my intent was that she would have the best day ever. So as long as I was in that intent, it didn't matter what we did. I walked all around a mall one day. And went sightseeing and buying fudge all through Helen all day, which some of you would love, by the way. But these are things that I would find torturous. But I loved it because I started off with the intent that my goal wasn't to sightsee and have fun. My goal wasn't to walk around a mall and look in window shop. My goal was to see a smile on her face and have her have the best day possible. So I just was focused on that intention. Okay? Some of you have great experiences on Shabbat, some of you don't. Some of you have great experiences when you go to a feast and some of you don't. But what is your mindset and intent when you get there? Okay? I remember when I was single and I was in the Worldwide Church of God back then, and we would have these big singles events. And there were guys I knew for sure that were absolutely miserable at these events because they went with the intention of finding a wife. And if they didn't, it was the worst event ever, which happened every time they went. Because they were already there with the wrong attitude. But others went there just to have fun and fellowship and be available to whatever Yah would have for them. And they had the best time ever. And so he's saying, look, when you're going to come together, divisions among you and not caring about what other people are, whether they're eating or not, and getting drunk, your intention was all wrong. You did not understand the point of coming here. You are eating in an unworthy manner. You are participating in something with the wrong mindset, the wrong approach, the wrong heart. Examine that. So before you do anything, you should ask yourself, what is it I'm trying to accomplish here? What is the right mindset for the thing I'm about to do? Okay? Think about that, husbands and wives. How much better would it be when you show up from work, whoever's home, or if you both show up at the same time, if each one of you has the right mindset to receive the other when you're showing up or the other one's home receiving you? Instead, as soon as the person shows up, you start dumping. Each one, doesn't matter, dumping of the one who came home or the one who was already at home. Oh, well, you know what's been going on over here. Instead of saying, my intention is to make the other person come back to a warm, friendly place, or for me to arrive in a warm, friendly manner, to make it a joy till we come together, and then at some point later we could deal with our other stuff. What if you thought about your mindset before you did anything? Before you deal with your children, before you deal with your husbands or wives, before you deal with other congregation members, before you deal with the leadership. Examine yourself. Because mostly we are in reactive mode. We're not thinking in advance and purposeful about what our intention is in anything that we're doing. We're just reacting. And in reacting, we spew all of our emotional junk on everybody. Instead of thinking, you know what, this might not be the time for that. You know what he's talking about here? There's a phrase I use, my children will tell you all the time. Situational awareness. You're examining yourself to see if you're situationally aware. What is the appropriate behavior in the situation? Because some things that you do are totally appropriate in certain situations and not in others. Right? Okay? And so being situationally aware. That's a big part of this. So I think that's a great question. So I thank you for that question. Okay, because it gave me the opportunity to share all that. But I think that's what we're talking about here, because some of you will say, but let a man examine himself, and so let him eat and drink. And some of you are going to constantly feel like you can't do it because you're so hard on yourselves that you're never perfect enough and blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's what it's talking about. Because he's talking about the approach when we're coming together and what we're doing when we're coming together. And examine yourself, are you ready and prepared to come together appropriately? Make sense? Okay, good. Any other questions?
I just wanted to encourage the men. I'm not going to give my whole testimony from before, but this just clarified even more stuff about coming under authority. My wife and I are learning that structure over the last few years since we've been here. And from my background, a lot of folks would say, well, why are you submitting to another man? You're, whatever. And I want to be like Yeshua. And the more I've been here, the more I've learned that Yeshua is under authority. How am I going to learn? I've been under authority that's worldly, governmental, whatever, and trusted that authority or even submitted to it even though I didn't agree with it. But learning the fullness of that and learning to submit to your authority, and that's what I want to encourage the men. If you're not under authority, you need to get there. The blessing is amazing. Okay, that's all I'm going to say for right now. The testimony that I have just for the few years that we've done it in my family and our household and everything has been amazing. And it's because of him, but I'm submitting to an earthly leadership. How in the world are you going to submit to a Yeshua that you can't see? Okay, you can't. I mean, you can to a point, but how are you going to make decisions? I'll give you an example. The house that I wanted to buy when I came down here was a house that was over here, and I was thinking, oh, this would be great. It's got fruit trees, and I said, wait a minute. That's not your norm. You're under authority now. You've asked Rabbi to be your discipler. You need to go and ask his permission. And some of you would say, well, who is he? I have vetted him out. I trust that Yahweh is working through this man in earthly authority. So I submitted to that authority, and I still submit to that authority. And some of the elders that are in this group. So I called him and I said, and then he said, well, let's get Dave over there. Let's get Daniel Hatt over there. And let's get a couple others over there to take a look. And the verdict was, even though...
Oh, I saw that house too. That's the one. Okay, yeah, I remember now. Okay, yeah.
And he came out, and I really wanted this house. I thought, well, it's 5 acres. It's got fruit trees. And it's a pretty house. We could make it work. And Dave came out of the house after he was in there 2 minutes. And he was like, no. And Rabbi said, nope. And they walked off. Now, I could have stomped and kicked. And inside of me, part of it was, I could have definitely gone, who are they? That was my norm. All through the military, everything else. And then I was a very adamant against leadership part group, especially coming into Messianic, because it had been done so wrong. But I said, nope, okay, I'm walking away. And my wife was very grateful. So by me submitting to leadership, a godly leadership that is doing their utmost to try to walk in that way, my wife can see me demonstrating Yeshua by submitting. Amen. So I want to encourage you men. There's nothing wrong with it. It's been very powerful for me.
Amen.
To submit. And I don't come to him with every little detail, and he doesn't come to me approaching stuff. I come to him. And I say, hey, I'm having trouble with this, or I'm having difficulty deciding this. And it's very hard for us men, because we left our homes to become men, to do what we think is right in our own eyes. That was part of the reason why I left home, because I wanted to do it my way. And now I've got a big brother who I believe is submitted and an anointed leadership that can help me walk this out to become more like Yeshua, so that when he returns, I'm already set in motion, my mindset, to be submissive to his authority. Because if I can be submissive to him,
Amen.
When Yeshua returns, it'll be absolutely no problem, because I've already learned to work with submission to an earthly authority. When he shows up, he's already going to know that my heart is already bent towards submission to him. So I just wanted to encourage the men today.
Amen. I want to add something to that, just because I think it's important. When Nate came to me, you have to understand, my relationship was with the whole family. Okay, I was working both with Nate and Dawn, specifically, and so I knew that my guidance was not just worrying about what he wanted, but I was helping him to make sure he understood what she wanted. And in the relationship, let me just give you an example how that could work. Phone rings, it's Dawn saying, I'm really concerned Nate's going to run off and do this, that, or the other thing. I say, trust Trust the process and the system. I'll talk to him, he'll call me, and we'll work it out. But he usually goes, no, this isn't usual. That was before I was involved. This is different now. By the way, that's something you all need to understand. If you bring authority into the situation from outside, whatever you're used to happening is by definition now different, because there's something that's in there now that wasn't in there before. And so in those conversations, I'd have to say to him, remember, we're trying to do this in a way that you're going to learn and do better in being the leader of your house. You're going to submit to that leadership, and you have covering to help guide. And that's why they call me a lot less now than they used to, because they've figured it out. Because they've called and they've learned and they've developed the processes. But the thing is, one of the things I said to them, I said, look, you need to understand when you came here, it's not just what you want, but what does she want? And is she going to want to walk into another fixer-upper because they've had some challenges with that? I said, no. I had them in, which they didn't really want to do, in a very nice higher-end apartment temporarily, because that was the best way to get her here while they were looking for the right place. And then Abba provided them with a beautiful place that needed almost no work to move into. But they had to do things they didn't want to do all along the way to get to that. But they had to understand that for me helping them get what they really wanted, which Nate wanted to be here with a happy wife more than he wanted the house. And now he has a happy wife in the house that he wanted. Okay? But through guidance and inspiration, what I believe was inspired, I said, look, I know you don't like this idea. I know you don't think that it's worth spending the money. He said, but I think while you're getting this all worked out, go into this nicer apartment so you have no stress. They'll take care of all the things. Everything will be wonderful until you can move into the kind of thing that you really want to move into and do that time. And you know what? They weren't in that apartment very long before the house came up for sale and they ended up buying it. Just a number of months. Okay? So, but just I want you to understand that it was the guidance that I gave with the idea of trying to help him be her hero, take care of her, and her learn to trust him to be her hero. Not that they were all looking to me. I was helping them do their thing. Does that make sense? And so when I looked at that house and Dave looked at it, we just were like, that's not what she is going to want to move here into. Okay? That's, even though he has this idea in his head, but sometimes men, you have to remember, you have to subjugate that into the fact that you're there to provide and protect. So you can't always have what you want, but you want to make sure they're getting what you're making their life's desires come true. And they're going to help you and support your vision. It's a balance in that. Okay? Nate.
I wanted to speak to that part of a little bit of the huge testimony about the house that we're in. I had been learning to submit to his guidance, and we weren't prepared to start looking. We weren't intending to start looking for a house for at least a year of being in these apartments. And I told Dawn, I said, we need to start looking just in case Abba opens something. And she did not want to look because she knew it was 12 months. We were planning on 12 months.
I know. She called me.
But she did.
Nate wants to start looking now.
Yeah.
It's okay. Relax.
And she did. She started looking.
Yep.
She started looking. And not less than what it was a few days later, you found this house that we're in now.
Yeah.
How long?
Yeah.
I don't know, a day or two. It was that night. That night she found the house that we're in now.
But in the conversation with me, I said, that's okay. You can look. Don't worry about it. But you have a plan in place. And if Abba provides something else, that's okay. But at least you have a plan. And so the first thing we did is we de-escalated all the emotions.
And she trusted that if I was in the wrong, she could go to Rabbi. And then if I needed to, I could receive counsel. Yeah. And then I would submit to that and regroup and try to figure out how to get back on track. But she trusted that there was somebody there to help me keep myself in line. But I have to be willing, and we have to, as a body, get to a place where we are willing to submit as a body, trusting that Yahweh is working. If we believe He's anointed, appointed, we have to get to a place to where we can work together as a body under that anointed, appointed. But that was what.
Right, if she had waited a couple hours, she said they would have missed that house. But the main point here is this, okay? Two things. One is they as a couple came under. So it wasn't one just calling me or the other. As a matter of fact, when one would call me, the first question they said was, has the other one called yet? And saying, well, he will or she will. So if he called me first, he would ask me, had Dawn called yet? If Dawn called me, she would ask Nate called. And so neither one thought they were trying to get the other in trouble. They all knew they were calling because they were bringing in, hopefully, someone who could help. Okay, so it was never like, oh, well, we don't straighten this out, I'm going to call Rabbi. No, if we're struggling, let's call Rabbi, let's bring him in. Okay? And so they have that relationship where that trust was built, and it took over time. Remember, neither one of them wanted any of this to begin with in terms of any kind of leadership. But by allowing it, they've all done things that they absolutely didn't think they would ever do, and it all ended up working out because they trusted the counsel to guide them through their fears and through their blindness from the emotional, on one hand, it was a fear thing more with Dawn and more of a desire thing with Nate. I want this, this is how but I had him take jobs he didn't want to take, and it's growing great. But that's not what he could see at that time. But I could see that was the thing he needed to bring stability into the whole thing. And then with you, I said, trust and be patient. This is a work in process. We'll get it there. Oh, no, but he's done this in the past. Well, this is not the same. He's listening to me now. And you've proven to her that you do listen. And this is the thing for all of you, that the reason we're doing this all out loud is to see what this looks like. Because most of you have never tried this with me. And so they like to share that so that you can know this is what, and if you don't really get enough of that, talk to them. They'll tell you exactly what it's looked like. And there's lots of times I've walked away and Nate's been like, But he's learning to change that part too, because he's seen that it does work. Not because I'm such a genius, but I allow for the Ruach to say, in this situation, with these talents and skills, or this in timing and finances or whatever, what makes the most sense to get them where they want to go? And it's a process. Sometimes it's just a matter of slowing it down. And if we slow it down, it works a lot better. But the whole thing is, can we do it with someone there who can? Mostly what I do is help calm the emotions down. Okay, let's calm it down and slow it down. But you know what? You need a third-party outside person to do that. That's kind of the reason for the structure. When you're upset and the wife's upset or the husband, whatever, you can't calm each other down so easily. But a third person can come in and say, hold on, take a breath, let's calm this down, okay? And some of you see me as very excitable now, but when I get into an excited, loud thing, I'm able to calm it down, okay? And so that's so I'm glad they're willing to share that out loud for you guys to see. And what's really great is that the proof is in the fruit of it, because, they're here, they're happy. Their house up in New York has been sold. They've got the place here that they bought. Okay, great testimony. Okay, anybody else?
As a single person coming out of a divorce and wanting to remarry, of course, we all have our options in this world. Mine stem back from my I would say my 20s, all through my 20s. And you know who I'm talking about, my friend from Birmingham. And he's very demanding about, insistent that, since we've known each other since I was 19, blah, blah, blah. He believes in Messiah and he wants to follow Yeshua and he has embraced the real name. And of course, we're friends and always have been friends. But he will not accept, again, come under the authority of Messiah, which says you must celebrate the Shabbat and not work. And as you well know, you're already dealing with couples that are married, and and obviously I have been listening to you, and I'm not under the authority of him because he's not my husband, and I can't make another mistake.
Right, and I think we've talked about this, but it's a good question to bring out loud. For those of you that are single, you've got a tremendous blessed opportunity to have yourself come under authority before you make choices so that you don't make bad choices, so that the authority can help you through the dating process and the vetting process, because especially if you've been married before, you already know you're capable of making a wrong choice. That doesn't mean all your choices are bad, but you've made a wrong choice. Some of you have been married more than once, and you've made wrong choices. So it might be helpful to have somebody help you through that process. And by the way, you might learn an awful lot about this man that you want to marry, not just you in this case, but anybody else, if that man is willing or not willing to come under authority. Because as Nate told you, and as Dawn would tell you, their marriage has worked so much better when it was literally almost divorced because of the coming under authority. And if her husband didn't, their marriage wouldn't have gotten, because after all, working just with her, only so much I could do. It was working with him that the marriage really got fixed. Okay? That's not to say that Dawn hasn't changed and done other things, but because Nate took, owned, and fixed a bunch of things that he needed to do to bring the right authority into his house in the right way, his house has been blessed. I think Dawn would agree and the children would agree that there's been some change and that change has made all the difference. And so in your case, I don't think anybody here should be marrying anybody unless they're going to come and counsel first and make sure that somebody outside of your emotional drive can say, hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? And really see, because look, if this gentleman, quote unquote, knows Messiah, I don't think he does. I'll tell you why. 1 John says, those who say they know him and don't keep the commandments are liars. So he doesn't really know the Messiah. So until he's ready to submit to Torah, he doesn't have the relationship he thinks he has. Remember I said, whether or not you have a relationship with him is not based on whether you think so, it's whether he thinks so. Okay? There's your mic drop. All right? So again, if you are interested in him, you should bring him to me. We should all sit down and talk together, and we should really help vet out so that it's not whether I approve of him. It's to get him and you to see him more clearly and him to see you more clearly and say, is this really going to work? Because to see Messiah more clearly in the way you both approach him. But the bottom line is, nobody should ever get divorced. I'm not saying that it's against Torah or anything, but divorce is awful. So you should do everything possible to avoid that. So when I say you shouldn't get divorced, I'm saying you shouldn't, it's wrong to do. I'm saying you should do whatever you can to avoid it. Divorce is awful. Those of you who've been divorced know it's awful. So if we can prevent it by doing things before getting married, that would make sense. If you are married, if we can prevent it by getting counsel and maybe fixing some things, that would make sense. Any divorce that could be avoided, it should be avoided. That's not saying it's wrong to get a divorce. You've heard the teaching I've done. Hopefully you understand that. But the thing is, it's awful. And so why don't we make every effort to not put ourselves in a marriage that's likely to end up in divorce? Okay? And so let's go through a vetting process and utilize leadership. That's another reason structure exists. Before you get up and make those vows, maybe you need someone to help you really see clearly whether or not you want to make those vows. Okay? Because look, I've talked about this often. The two most important things we do in life, we get really no training and no counseling about: marriage and having babies. We're not really trained to know what to do with a baby, and we're not really trained to know what to do with a spouse. We're just smitten for some reason, we're smitten by their looks, their personality, or whatever. We know them, they're friends, we fall in love. You know what? What's love got to do with it? You know what? I've been in love with lots of people that I didn't marry, and it's a good thing I didn't. Okay? Because you could fall in love with lots of people. You can love lots of things. It doesn't mean that's the one you need to marry. You're looking for that life partner that you're going to join together and go in a direction. And look, two cannot walk together unless they are agreed. Are you agreed in your walking together? Just because you could fall in love with doesn't mean that you actually are meant to be together. And so let's be careful with that. Because you can, many of you have had other people that you kind of thought you were in love with, but you didn't marry them. It's probably a really good thing. Okay? Okay? But that doesn't mean that, well, what it does mean is that you're always best off getting counsel. And not just counsel from friends and people that know you, that have all their own desires and interests and motivations, but get somebody who has no dog in the hunt. It doesn't matter to me if you get married or not. What matters to me is that if I have to counsel you if you marry badly. So if I can avoid those phone calls, I would like to. So let me help you marry well. Meaning, figure out what will make you happy, what will make him happy, and make sure you actually are compatible and all those things, and that you're going in the same direction, which right now it doesn't sound like. So I would say, at this point, this doesn't look like it's probably a good idea. I haven't talked to him, though. Okay? So let's talk and see what that is, if that's really something you want to do. Okay? But recognize that's another reason why you want structure, because structure gives you that you couldn't do on your own. Okay? All right. Anything else? One more? Yes, you can. Okay, yes, you can. Okay? She was just asking, can I ask for a covering from you? And I said, yes, you can. And she said, I'm doing it officially. And yes, you can. Okay. But just remember, if you do that, there's a relationship that requires then a certain amount of submission and willingness to listen to that covering. Okay. Last question.
Okay, from Kendall Phillips, in 1 Corinthians 11, 18 and 19, should we still fellowship with a group that has a lot of division and no structure / authority? Where's the line drawn with trying to fellowship and disagreeing with the no structure?
Okay. Some of you on the live streams, I'll talk this way. Some of you here have already made these choices. That's why you're here. Okay, some of you are still in places where there are congregations reasonably close by where you could go that are problematic. Their teachings are either problematic, their structure might be problematic, the dynamic of the congregation as was described here may be problematic. And you've got to ask yourself, why am I going? And if the answer to the why is met by the things that are offered there, then fine, keep going. But if the reason for you to be there, not why are you, I'm not saying to ask the question, why do you keep going? What are you hoping to accomplish? Why would you go? And if they're not providing the why, then why do you go? Well, there's no place else to go. Well, no place else to go is not a good reason to go. You should have a proactive reason to go, not the there's no other choice reason to go. Okay? Because going to a place where you're not actually getting your why met, I want to go to experience Messiah in the context of an assembly who's walking out the Torah and trying to get into the kingdom and understand structure and all that. If that's not there, you're only going to be frustrated, which is why you call me up and you're frustrated and you ask questions like Kendall's asking, and you know the answer. The answer is you're not getting what you need there. Why are you going? Now, if you had a possible influence to be there to change it, then maybe that'd be different, but the odds are you don't. The thing's been going that way for a long time. It's not likely to change anytime soon. The only thing that will fix a mess like that is a leader coming in and fixing it. Like Paul says, he says, and the rest I shall set in order when I come. Because he has authority to do that. Okay? And so, unfortunately, that means a lot of people are going to end up on the live stream, which is where you are now, and not going to these assemblies because they're not viable for what you need. Okay, I've been in congregations that I've left because at some point I said, this is not what I need. This is not doing it for me. I can't do this anymore, and I've left. And it doesn't matter what the particular thing was. I just recognized I was not getting, it was disturbing my shalom and my Shabbat. It was distracting me. It was irritation. It was whatever it was that just after a while I said, I can't do this anymore. Excuse me, okay? And you have to decide the same thing for yourself. Okay, it's like, look, at some point, I know you could never go back and sit in a mainstream church and hear them say Jesus 57 times an hour, okay, or a minute, or whatever they're doing, because it would irritate you. Or they would read scripture in a completely wrong understanding, and it would irritate you. And at some point, you sit there going, well, then why do you keep going? Because I'm lonely. Well, then maybe deal with that problem. No, really, that's the main reason why most of the people who call me up still go to where they go. They're lonely. They don't want to, they're afraid to be alone in their living room and only do things through a virtual internet. But you know what? Maybe there's reason to move then. Move to where look, some of you, how many of you have moved because of employment? Okay? There are some hands. So, you know what? When there's no work where you are, there are people that get up and move because what they need is not where they are. If you need this, you might leave California and move. So might you. All right? I knew I was going to sneak that in today somewhere. Or New York and move. Or New Hampshire move. Or Virginia and move. Because needing this is more important than whatever else you had over there. Because you left things that you had. You left people you knew, you left friends that you knew, you left jobs, whatever. But you left your comfort zone, but you left because this was more important. I'm not saying it should be, it just was. For some people, they're comfortable enough where they are, and they have other things that are real important because their career, whatever it is, they can only do better where they are, so they have to stay where they are. But only you can answer for yourself. Are you getting more out of the live stream? Or are you getting more out of going to an assembly where you're frustrated? Your choice. I don't know. It's only you can answer that question. Okay? Am I going to tell you it's wrong to go? No. If they're keeping Shabbat, okay, then going is not wrong. However, if they're nonstop teaching things that you know are wrong, well, then that's not good for you either. Because now you're hearing and possibly going to, get indoctrinated into stuff that's wrong. The more you hear it, the more you're likely to buy into it. So you got to decide what is the motivation to be there, and is that motivation to be there being fulfilled in any way? Are you being fed? Are you being led? Are you being inspired? Are you being helped in the transformation from what you are into what he is? No. Okay, then why do you go? Okay? That's all I can give you for that. That's why we make this as interactive as we can. I keep pointing over there because that's where the guys are taking the. That's why we're being as interactive as we can. Because we want to give you as virtual an experience as possible, knowing that if there was a viable place to go, you'd be going. But this is all you have right now. Keep praying that the yeshiva will start, and I'll get a place for the men to come and get trained, and we can send them out in a shluchim, a shaliach type of way, an apostle way, to plant and run congregations wherever we can send them. It's my desire that the live stream would only be for those that still don't have a place that we were able to plant. Because the live stream, while it's great, I would love it that we didn't need to do it at all. That nobody would need this. That they would have it where they are. Because those of you that have come to visit have always said the same thing. Wow, this is not anything like the live stream. It's so different to be here. Sounds different, everything looks different. It's just different, of course, because you're physically here. And because you had to put on clothes instead of your pajamas. Oh yeah, I can see into that. And by the way, some of you need to do something, okay? Just saying. Okay, maybe brush the hair a little bit or something, I don't know. Okay. I can't help myself. So live stream is a little bit different, okay? But the bottom line is, only you could decide about that. So, but if you're asking the question, I'll tell you what. I'll use my wife as an example. When my wife is shopping with me and she goes to get an outfit and she tries it on, and I know when she asks my opinion on it, I know she already doesn't like it. But she likes it, but she doesn't like it. Because if she likes it, she doesn't ask me. Okay? See, if you liked it, you wouldn't be asking me. You know you don't need to be going anymore. You know you need to make the switch. And that's the only reason you're asking. But for whatever reason, you can't pull the trigger. So, like the lady who said, well, does this look fat on me? Does this look this on me? Is this too this? Is this too high? Is this too low? Well, you don't like it, so don't get it. Because I know if you liked it, you wouldn't even ask. Okay? You have to know what you're dealing with. In your case, and in most people's cases, the reason you're asking about your congregation is because you already know. You just don't like the answer. The answer is you're going to stop going, which means the people that you still like there and you love there, whatever, you're not going to see them as much, and you're not going to have that fellowship that you like. But the other stuff has been irritating you to the point where you're asking the question. So something about the dress irritated my wife to the point where she said, what do you think, and everything. I was like, no. And she's like, no? I was like, obviously you don't like it or you wouldn't be asking me. Okay? I've learned you got to know yourself. You're only asking the question because you know the answer. Okay? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, one more.
Shalom.
Shalom.
My name is Charlie, and this is my wife, Renee. We've been here a couple of times. And there's a lot of folks out there that's watching on the live feed that don't have anywhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's for them that I'm doing this. Okay? I'd like everybody else to have some place they can go until we can provide for everybody. In the meantime, that's the reason we do this.
Right. Well, Renee and I should count ourselves fortunate that we have 4 congregations within an hour and a half. And we've been to all of them. And the why is just not there, And it's sad from some of the things you were talking about. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we went over to Lakeview. You were over there. MTOI is a great organization, and we've hooked up with those folks over there. And by the way, hi guys over there in Lakeview, Ohio. We live in Indiana, and we drive 3 hours every Shabbat to go over there. And we love them over there. They're like family to us. We've only been there a few times, and so if you can find a place to go, go. I mean, this is a place right here. I mean, the MTOI. I don't know about the other ones around the country, but I know the one in Ohio in Lakeview is awesome. And I thank Yahweh for MTOI, and you guys are awesome. And shalom to all of you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so we'll close with this, but I want to just make a point that when he was making his point, remember that the Lakeview group watches live stream as a group. See, so you don't need even more than that to be blessed and to drive 3 hours to have fellowship, because they have a big screen and they watch the live stream, but they also have the fellowship. They're there together. They meet before services. They hang out after services. They dance a little bit if they want to dance when we're dancing. They sing along and they participate, but they do it as a group. And they'll have 20, 30, 40 people there depending on the week. And so if you're out there, you can do the same thing. You can get a group together if there's 2 or 3 or 4 families, even whatever little it is, and just put it up on a screen. But you have the fellowship and you have this. Until a leader or teacher is raised up to be there to really do that, there's nothing wrong. And you saw how blessed and how excited he was to say that he's willing to drive 3 hours from Indiana to be there. He's going there to watch this. But he's doing it with people that are fellowshipping. And so he's getting the best of both for right now. He's getting this service, but with people. And so don't think that that's not a viable choice. We have several congregations that's what they do. They gather together. They actually rent it. This group in Ohio rents a building, and they project up on a screen up on the wall there, and they've got the live service going. Okay? And so you certainly can do that wherever you are. I got to look at the right camera for this. You guys can do that wherever you are. Just call us, and we can talk about how you can do that. All right, and then you can affiliate it, et cetera. And so I really appreciate that you pointed out, because that's a viable alternative. And it's kind of a hybrid of the live stream, but with people. They do that in the one in Nebraska as well. They live stream, but with people. They do, And no pajamas, that's right, Wise guy. All right, I think that's going to cover it. No more questions, we good? All right, get all the children down here. I'm going to wrap this up. All right.